Can you make it pop?
What does this even mean? Well, pop essentially just means contrast, but not this contrast. Contrast or juxtaposition are umbrella terms in design which encompass everything, not just color. Colors have three values: hue, saturation, and lightness, which means there's three ways to create contrast using these. Not like this example, which is only focusing on luminosity. Here's an example of a great thumbnail with a great luminosity contrast. You can see the main area of interest here is the complete opposite luminosity to everything surrounding. And he could have made the hoodie bright red, of course, but I assume he wanted to save some saturation for the pen too. So is it possible to make a dark thumbnail pop? Well, kind of. If you keep every other fundamental in mind, you can create areas of interest just through lights and darks. But it's a safer bet to mix this with other values which come later on. For the second value, saturation, this is where I see the most mistakes in beginner thumbnail designers. So you're saying my thumbnail shouldn't have vivid colors? No, not at all. The point is to create contrast with it, not just mindlessly dump saturation everywhere. ZHC's iconic brushstroke is the prime example of this. The entire thumbnail is super low saturation with ultra high saturation here where the main focus is. For instance, this example here, he could have made the wall bright blue, but then does the main focus stand out as much anymore? Or take this example from Airac. The concept of this video is 100 dates in 24 hours. So you want to make it clear with the amount of people, the quantity, but you also want the woman to stick out the most. So to do this, he uses saturation contrast. And even though the majority of the thumbnail is these guys here, your eye is still drawn here because of the saturation. You can also just use saturation to separate foreground and background elements, like this example from Mike Shake again. The last color value, hue, is where it gets fun. You can still have maximum lightness and saturation and still create contrast with just the hues you choose to use. In a general sense, warm colors contrast with cool colors. In a more technical sense, complementary colors contrast the most. But you don't always want to be limited to two colors, right? No problem. Here's other types of color schemes you can use. Here's an example from Mr. Beast. So you want the crowd to stand out enough from the field, but you mainly want the dodgeballs to stand out from both of these. So what you can do is use a split complementary color scheme to have primary and secondary subjects. Here's one I've done for Unspeakable, which uses a triad color scheme. So the green is the majority color and the elements in front are the other two colors in the triad. And here's a really nice example of a tetradic, which uses two sets of complementary colors, which separates the foreground and background elements. Really nicely done. You can see you have a lot of freedom still with just the hue, but it's when you combine all three of these values to create contrast is when you'll hold the power to make your thumbnails really pop.